All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Less Kevin, More Tech, UTECit.com. We got a special guest today. Derek Puzio is here. We're going to talk over a lot of stuff, but we just started a few seconds before we opened up here about talking about your love for cooking. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, I learned out of necessity, and it went from picking up a box of macaroni and cheese as a 10-year-old to making a baked manicotti to, what's the craziest thing I've done? A turducken once.
Wow, okay.
So, Derek, actually come back just a little bit. You just said it started out of necessity. So what are we dealing with here? You're on the side of the road, got no food.
No, so when I was younger, my parents divorced.
Okay.
And so I wound up with my dad. He was an attorney, and he was working all kinds of crazy hours. So I was left at home with my younger brother, and, got to take care of my, he's taller than me now, but my little brother. And was like, hey, I'm hungry. All right, let's figure this out. So I'm like, what do we got in the pantry? We got boxes of pastaroni. We got boxes of Kraft mac and cheese. We've got stuff for spaghetti. So it's just literally picking it up and doing it out of necessity. And then I'm like, hey, I can make this taste better. Mm-hmm. And then what really kicked it off is when my father tried to make goulash one night, and it turned into a sludge. So I've got old Kodak physical photos of this where he's got the pan and a wooden spoon stick like this upside down. Nothing comes out of it. He takes a bite out of it and goes, oh, it's not so bad. As he wants to vomit. And we're like, all right, this is a pizza night. So that was like a turning point where I'm like, I really need to learn this. And now I'm just way over the top. Anything you can imagine in the kitchen is what I've got just out of a hobby.
So it truly was out of necessity.
Yeah.
Wow, sounds like it.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it, but
Hey, you don't look like you've overcarbed in your life. That's
What's your favorite gadget?
Honestly, right now, I'm going to say because I've got the Ninja Foodie air fryer, pressure cooker.
All in one?
Yeah, that's so handy.
Yeah. Because
I'll make big batches of Mexican rice. And so it's got the capability to do a sear or a saute in the pot. Mm-hmm. So I'll toast the rice before I actually get it ready for all of the liquid ingredients.
Oh, you are fancy.
Yes.
So you don't buy the patch or the bag and throw in the mic?
No.
No, okay. Yeah.
No, that
is that your go-to?
That's my go-to for Mexican rice.
No, it never comes out the same. You lose all the flavor. It's so salty. It's just not the same.
Wow. Well, hey Vince, do you mind if I segue? Because that was pretty cool.
Go.
So, but I'm going to come back to it. But Derek, so why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us, why you're here? Because I think you got a pretty compelling story, and I think you have a very compelling message for the current business climate. So give us a little introduction about that.
Yeah, so...
And then we'll get back to the food.
Okay. As long as we can do lunch, we're good. So, yeah, I specialize in commercial insurance, everything from your cyber to your general and professional liabilities. I've been doing insurance now and specializing in this for about 6 years, specifically on the commercial side, but about close to 10 years now of insurance experience in the past. And through all of my training and everything that I've been seeing in the business climate these days, cyber has been coming up a lot more and more as far as the amount of claims that have come up from it, the amount of phishing emails and things that are coming out. And so it's just proving that cyber coverage specifically is more important than ever, because you're more, as a small business owner, you're more likely to get hit by that than by any other type of claim, short of the tornadoes that hit Portage.
Yeah, right.
Funny thing is, we went to breakfast and we talked about him doing this, and that was the day of the tornadoes that touched down in what city was it?
Portage,
yeah. And you had a client that got totally wiped out.
Yeah.
They still haven't cleaned all that up.
No.
When you drive past it, you can still see it.
Yeah, it's a disaster. My mother lives out that way.
Yeah. On the cyber, because you can't open a newspaper or click on a homepage anywhere without something, right? So what do you, I guess, what over the last 6-12 months, what are you seeing? What's the radical change?
So I'll say this from the carrier standpoint, from the insurance company standpoint, their eyes are starting to open up, like really open up to the amount of risk and hazard that's coming out of these. Realizing,
yeah, well, no, just on that, because there's always this thing like, I buy car insurance, right? To insure damage, right? But I always think, well, the insurance company's making money. The insurance companies make a lot of money. So when you say they're opening their eyes, are they opening their eyes to the opportunity, or are they opening the eyes to potential loss?
all of the above. So you've got carriers that are now starting to put on in their general liability packages, a cyber endorsement that'll cover your first party coverages and up to certain limits, and then there's sub limits and things in there. It's all in the policy language because no two cyber policies are ever the same. And then you have other carriers that are ahead of the game where they've got both first party, third party, and then 100% sub limits. So if somebody wants to ransom your stuff for $100,000, you have that coverage. You're not limited to like $5,000 like I've seen on some other policies, or $2,500, because now the average ransom is pushing around $25,000 to $30,000.
I guess, from the person, you're a provider, right?
Yes.
How do you sift through that? If all the policies are different, how do you sift through what the market and what people should be looking for?
See, that's a good question. So as far as what they should be looking for is all dependent on the business. So let's take UTEC, for example. If you guys get hit with something, you're not only, subject to all the first party coverages that are going to come up, and that's you guys. You have all the third party, which is everybody that you service. Mm-hmm. And so it's business dependent on what type of, cyber policy you need. Because like an auto shop, for example, they're just running your credit card or, processing a check. They may not need, 500,000 coverage with all the different sublimits and things built in. But if they ever get hit, they still have the duty to notify, and there's things and steps they have to do. So, carrying even just a minimum coverage will be more than sufficient for what they have going on. So it's all dependent. And then as far as figuring out who does what, it's on the agent and it's on the underwriter. So it's on your agent to be on the ball and know what their product is and be the expert in it, because no two policies are the same. No two carriers offer the same lineup. It's different everywhere you go.
A lot of education.
One of the things too is that I was intrigued with is that a lot of times folks go out, get a cyber policy, and they're like, I'm covered. Speak a little bit about, the items that people have to go through. I mean, there's essentially a checklist. So once you buy the policy, it's not like you're saved from anything. You better be doing this, and this behind the scenes in order to qualify. Because once you would have a loss and there is a claim, they're going to come back and say, hey, did you have a multi-factor authentication process? There's a lot of things that they're going to go through. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so the answer to that question varies business to business, depending on what kind of information they have access to. So just case in point, I had an investment advisor recently come to me with a cyber policy. They had a sublimit of, I think it was 3% or 5% on a $250,000 maximum limit. And she thought, oh yeah, I'm good, I'm covered. Went through the list with her, and she's like, oh, I had no idea that was in there.
Yeah.
The application she filled out and submitted to the agent and what she got were two completely different things. And then as far as what you're speaking to for the list of requirements, yes, if you don't meet the sheet for what the insurance carrier tells you need to have, you're paying for nothing. And so depending on the business, it could be multi-factor. Depending on the business, it could be different levels of antivirus or other things in place. It could be where...
Who audits that?
The carrier will actually audit that at renewal. Mm-hmm. So they'll send out a sheet for it, and then it's up to the person to audit it. And if they don't have any of that, they'll usually call me. Because if they don't have somebody like UTEC to go and do it, they're on the phone with me. Hey, what is this? How do I do this? And then that's where I'm like, hey, if you want this to continue, you got to get connected with like these guys because they're going to make sure you have it.
Right. Okay. So it's filling out the form is actually incumbent upon the client then.
Yes. Now, if they have an IT department, then it just gets sent directly to the IT department. And then that's set up at the binding of the policy. So if they're already a current customer of, say UTEC or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They get put in as the insurance contact for the policy. So then at renewal, that just gets sent right to them, and then they ship it back, and then the policy holder can just go about their day.
So are the questions, are they pretty much black and white, or are there gray area?
They're pretty black and white. It's either yes, you have this, or no, you don't. Yeah. And then there's depending on the business, some of them will ask, okay, so you have this. What do you have encompassing here? Like, what type of antivirus do you have? How many times do you update it throughout the month, the year, whatever? What types of multi-factor authentication you have? Do you use encryption for your files and your emails, things like that?
Yeah.
So did they ever get to a point where, here's what we do and here's what we have, and insurance company will say, well, that's not good enough?
Yes.
So what's that like? Then what happened? Do you got to deliver that message? Is that?
Yeah. So if it comes back and it's not good enough, I get to make the bad news phone call. Thankfully, I've been able to avoid those because I've always had a connection to say, hey, here, this is who you need to go to keep this. And I've had to make very few of those calls in my tenure. But yes, and if they don't meet the sheet, they will be non-renewed.
Yeah, then they're in deep sheet.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to use that meet the sheet. I like that. I
yeah,
like that.
exactly.
That's good. I'm going to steal that from you.
Well, you were in mortgages for a while.
Yeah.
That's literally how you qualify for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Meet the sheet.
Yeah, meet the sheet. Yeah. Yep.
So that's pretty crazy. Where do you think it's going?
It's only going to get bigger. The requirements I don't see changing unless there's some drastic change on the IT end, is depending on what's, like the most common attack, because, there's DDoS and brute force and all that other fun stuff. So unless there's some drastic change on any of that, it's going to remain relatively the same as far as, the sheet requirements. But as far as, the amount of incidents of cyber, the amount of claims that are coming up from it, it's just increasing every year.
Yeah.
What was it? Over the last couple of years, the small business owners, like 60 or 66% more likely to face
Crazy.
a cyber attack than, some big, like a bank or whatever. And
so intuitively, since more people are going to be buying insurance, the rates are going to go down, right?
Depends on how many claims there are.
You set them up.
Yeah, you would think. So we're actually in a really hard market right now with insurance, and as far as that goes, because of all the crazy claims. I mean, we just got into storm season, and Portage just got destroyed. So hopefully the rest of the season's pretty calm, because Michigan, unlike other parts of the country, we're actually doing really well as far as that's concerned, because there's spots like Florida and California where carriers are just pulling out left and right, and you can't get insurance at all. And
we're safe in the mitten.
Yeah. So up here, we're relatively safe as far as all that's concerned, and we're still in a good place compared to other parts of the country. And the carriers up here are still pretty aggressive as far as what they want, what they'll take, and then even on the cyber end, because I don't know, for some reason we're just better up here, and they're pretty lenient as far as, hey, we'll take this business or we'll take that business, and it's favorable right now.
Yeah, we've really went to, I think folks are starting to, obviously with everything in the media and people getting popped, and obviously the bigger folks that are getting hit with the cyber attacks are hitting the press. But I think people little by little, because it's no longer an if, it's when, right, scenario on this, and you got to be protected. I mean, it's no longer can you ignore it. We're trying to get that message out more and more.
Yeah, it is absolutely a when, because like I myself, I think at least once or twice a week I'm getting phishing emails at minimum once or twice a week. And those are the things that, slip through, the firewalls and all the stuff that we have in place. I'm like, I mean, you can tell when it's, garbage email, so it's
Right.
delete.
Right.
But
Well, you hope you can, because people get busy. That's what
Oh,
happens, right? You know what
and
I mean,
that's
and these guys are professionals, and they know what they can hit you with, and to get you to hopefully hit that accept button or open button, and next thing you know, you're on your way to being locked up.
and that's where the vast majority of cyber claims comes from, is human error. Whether it's from a phishing email, somebody clicking on something they're not supposed to, going to a website that's infected, or downloading a file that has, Trojan in it. That's where the vast majority of cyber claims
Yeah.
come from, is all human error.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what do you do to counteract that?
Just some education. You got to make sure you're educating your employees. You got to make sure you're trying to stay on top of it, because you can pad the walls, you can plug the outlets, but somebody's still going to find a way to put a fork in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure about the education piece. It's really the greatest defense, if you will. But with AI and social engineering, these attacks are becoming pretty undistinguishable.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, I mean, these guys have bots that they're doing all this with, right? I mean, before there was a guy sitting in a dark basement at his grandma's house, right, trying to figure out your password. Now it's, they're going to social media, they're getting your dog's name, they're getting your favorite hockey player's name, and they're running, 10,000 a second off that, computer-wise, and it's not a hard. Most of us don't have a 17-letter and symbol password, these days for sure. So it's becoming easier and easier.
Yeah, and like you said, you can program a bot to do day trading for you. So you can program it to, hack and brute force into people's systems, and you can replicate it tenfold, hundredfold, depends on how adventurous the person wants to go. But your whole system could just get brute forced by somebody with a bunch of bots running, and good luck operating at that point.
Yeah.
So how can insurance operate in that kind of an environment? So let me ask it a different way. So when I think about life insurance, right? We all know nobody here at this table is going to get out of this thing alive, right? So you have these actuarial type folks. They do all these studies, analysis, and then they say, hey, this is your monthly payment. But cyber seems to be so filled with variables. I don't know how you could use science to predict or calculate the future.
See, that's a good question for a math nerd.
I'm just saying with life, it seems pretty easy. You eat pizza and spaghetti, smoke and drink too much. Your payment's a little higher, but
see, the whole thing with cyber is the way that the math nerds run that is, as long as you're following these steps, you can reasonably estimate your likelihood of a loss. And so that's how they run it, and that's how they base it. And then as far as coming up with the premium, somebody with an auto shop, for a $100,000 policy may only pay $200 a year for $100,000 of cyber coverage. But then an investment advisor for $500,000 may be paying $1,000, and it's all due to the sensitivity of the information they have and the potential damage that could come from from a breach.
Yeah.
And so that's doing that, and as long as they meet the sheet, they can reasonably estimate the likelihood of a loss, and then they factor it out with statistics. But it's all math nerds.
Do you ever see a time where they could just completely pull out of the thing, just like what you'd mentioned earlier with the California and Florida insurance companies with physical insurance?
As far as cyber, no, because that's going to be, like right now, it's an optional coverage. And I say optional because not every agent and not every company even knows the product and knows what to do with it. And if they don't know what to do with it, they don't know how to explain it to somebody and why it's important. So right now it's optional based on lack of knowledge of all of it. But once it becomes more widespread of what it is, and the carrier, some of these slower carriers are more on the ball, and the agents are better at educating themselves to help protect their clients.
Yeah.
it's just going to become a mandatory thing because, you know, you can reasonably predict, you know, like when a tornado is going to show up. You can reasonably predict when, or get a guesstimation on, you know, when an attack's going to happen, because statistically it'll happen at some point.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it's mandatory, and it will start making more mainstream moves into the core of your liability policy, rather than just being an endorsement. It's going to be a specific line item, like your general liability or your products completed.
So, can you insure against reputational harm?
Yes.
What? How do you do that?
So it depends on the type of the loss. So if it's coming from a cyber, that is covered under the cyber policy, depending on which party it is and which lawsuit it is. So like your first party would be you yourself, the policyholder. And then some carriers with their cyber policies will actually cover that included in your limits. And then there's others that will exclude that. So it's dependent, but yes, you can. And then if it's something from like personal injury, from like, I don't know, some other business operation, your general liability can pick that up, assuming you have that ticked on your policy for that particular coverage.
Got it. It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm astounded by the number of people that have been hit and don't even talk about it. We're talking to people in regards to the IT service package that we offer here. And, you know, after you get to know them and have conversations, it's funny. We're sitting there and they're going, yeah, I got to tell a family secret. You know, a year ago we got popped and we didn't have this. And a lot of times I'm like, well, it took you a year to reach out, or it's almost like they just kind of, you know, get in the fetal position, start sucking their thumb, you know, what I mean? Like, what do I do? Where do I go? And rocking, you know, it's, but it's more and more as we get the exposure of this out there. I mean, people are knowing that it's it's just a fact of life, you know, and you gotta stare it in the eye. You can't no longer ignore it.
Yeah. I mean, just from a personal experience, I mean, over the last 6 months, because my father has a card through Costco. His card was taken 2 separate times in a matter of 3 months. So naturally, that was great for his billing on his personal policies. But and so I mean, it's happening to everybody, whether it's an individual or a business. Obviously, with an individual, you'll know pretty darn quick. With a business, depending on what you're doing and how attentive you are, you may not know.
Yeah.
The minute you do know, your first call should be to your insurance company, because then it's damage control time. Save your business time.
Right. Yeah. We saw a week or so ago, the average attack, they're in there 200 plus days before they're known.
Yeah, they're behind the scenes waiting for, you know, something to go bad. So it's crazy. It's crazy to think about it.
Yeah.
You know?
So what do you think the insurance companies are in your industry are going to look like in a couple of years?
So one of my carriers, you know, Hanover, they have a guy who's specifically dedicated to cyber, and they're one of my favorite places to go for cyber, because they include the first party, third party, 100% sub limits. And so you'll see more carriers doing what they've done and having specialty people take that over and run that particular product, because of where everything is heading with technology and with information being how it is.
Do you ever see them saying something to the effect, hey, Derek, we looked at this sheet. We see what they have for their antivirus. We see what they have. We need you to tell them to get this. And that product, if you will, is a Hanover product, or whatever the carrier is. So then now the carrier becomes not only the insurer, but also the provider and preventer. Do you ever see something like that happening?
Knowing the insurance carriers like I do, I'm going to say no, because they're slow. Insurance is usually behind the ball as far as some of this stuff, and so the carriers that are on the cutting edge of all of this are still, you know, behind where it should have been, you know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And if they ever get to that point, it's not going to be for at least a few decades, because it takes them a decade just to update the the programming that I use to quote them out. So no, if they get to that point, I think there'll be a snowball's chance.
So the goal is to rely on you, your personal relationships, and for your personal recommendations to say, hey, listen, I know this guy Vince, give him a call or that kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, I lean pretty heavily on my referral partners. So any of the businesses that I work with that, because with me verbatim, everybody gets a cyber policy, regardless if you're a small auto shop or you're a retail store.
Yeah,
doesn't matter. Everybody gets cyber of some way, shape, or form, just because of what's going on. Because the last thing I want to do is get a phone call, hey, we got hacked, or somebody skimmed our card reader while they were in here.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, man. I don't have coverage for that.
Yeah.
Because that's the worst case scenario for me. Because that means I didn't do my job properly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the referrals in the future business, and
yeah. So give us a little insight on just maybe a couple bullet points for the folks that are listening out there that are business owners and right now. What give some advice. So what should they be doing?
Review your policy first and foremost. See what you have and what you don't have. Obviously, that's something you would do to sit down with your agent to actually go over it. Because if you're not reviewing your business policy at least once a year, you're behind the ball on your own policy, whether it's for cyber or your general liability. Because it's a living policy. As your business changes and evolves, it changes and evolves with you. And so, in doing that review and doing that update, look over your cyber coverage. Because in the case of the investment advisor that I had, she had a $250,000 limit for her policy, but she had a whole bunch of sub-limits in there that made it, what's the point of even having this?
Right.
Sure.
So how many sub-limits are there?
Depends on the carrier. So some of them will have sub-limits for ransom. Some of them have sub-limits for like damage control and reputation cleanup. Some of them have sub-limits for...
So there could be unlimited.
Yes.
So that even makes it more important to review it.
Yes.
And then it probably makes it a little important to see, what else is available in the market.
Yes.
Yep.
Because you can go get a cheap cyber policy that's, not worth, it's about as good as a wet paper bag for $100 a year. Or you go get something that's a little bit more that's actually going to do what you want it to do in worst case scenario. It's like it's a difference between buying a beater with a heater and a Cadillac.
Right. Yeah.
You get what you pay for.
Right. Well,
And unfortunately, you don't get to find out what you bought until after the
Yes, and that's the famous thing is, oh, my insurance is fine until it's not.
Right.
yeah. And
That's when you
then you're
find
the
out.
bad guy, right?
Yes.
You should have protected me for this.
Yes,
Right.
and that's everybody's famous line. Oh yeah, it's fine, it's good, until it's not.
Right.
And that's not the time you want to find out that you've been paying for nothing.
It's
Right.
the old line, it's a recession until you lose your job, then it's a depression.
Right.
So, wow, that's a lot of education here coming out.
Yeah. A lot of stuff to unpack here for sure. But at the end of the day, the first thing is you got to reach out. You got to do your own investigative work with your policy. And at the end of the day, be smart about it. Don't need to be overinsured, but you sure don't want to be underinsured. That's for sure.
Yes, and it's actually cheaper to be overinsured than it is under.
Yeah.
Well, you ready?
I'm ready.
So, Derek, we started out with the cooking thing. Fascinating, hobby and what have you. And then I'd ask you, what's your favorite bourbon? Do you remember what you said?
Anything I can cook with.
Exactly. So we usually wrap up with a quick toast here. So, but what's your favorite thing to cook bourbon with?
The bourbon glazed pork chops are probably one of my favorite.
Really? So, knowing how you look like you don't eat much, and give us a little flavor of that, and then we'll have a little going away toast.
So it depends on the kind of notes and things that you're coming out with the bourbon. Will kind of dictate what you put in there. But one of the favorite things that I do is actually mix in like pineapple and pineapple juice into the bourbon. The acidity helps bring out more of the flavor from the bourbon as it's simmering down.
Right.
And the alcohol's coming out. Another thing that you can put in there to kind of help with it a little bit, depending on what it is, maybe some teriyaki, maybe Worcestershire sauce. Just depends on what you're doing, but it comes out. It's very rich. It's a very rich glaze, and it pairs amazingly with a roasted rosemary and garlic potato.
Wow.
There we go.
Well,
Boy,
I'm
saying
normally
that-
getting a quarter pounder with cheese, but that sounds a lot better. Let's have a little toast. Good luck to you.
good luck to you, Derek. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.